European leaders agreed on a plan that aims to vastly increase Europe's defense and security investments as they convened in Brussels for an emergency summit. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that peace talks with U.S. officials will resume in Saudi Arabia next week.
Putin reacts to Macron's "Russia is a threat" statement by reminding him of events from the past.
EU leaders have agreed on a momentous plan to vastly increase European defence and security investment and spending of up to €800 billion. Heads of state and governments, joined by Ukrainian President Zelensky, travelled to Brussels as part of an emergency meeting, triggered in response to waning transatlantic relations and an announcement by the US that it was suspending military supplies to Kyiv. Meanwhile, it's not clear whether the US will provide a backstop to European peacekeeping troops in the event of a peace deal in Ukraine. But President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, says guarantees were necessary to preserve global order.
First of all, the best security guarantee are the Ukrainians themselves. Since 24th of February 2022, the Ukrainian army is resisting. A lot of people believed at that time that they cannot resist more than 3 days, then more than 3 weeks. Now they are resisting more than 3 years. Because this war is not only about Ukraine, it's about the respect of international law, it's the respect of international rules-based order.
Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban blocked conclusions at the summit, reaffirming the EU's unrelenting military support of Ukraine, saying the EU was isolating itself from Russia, the US and China. But President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, said Hungary was isolated from the rest of the Union.
Hungary is a different strategic approach on Ukraine. But that means that Hungary is isolated among the 27. And we respect Hungary's position, but it's 1 out of 27, and 26 are more than 1.
President Zelensky thanked EU leaders for their unwavering support at a time described by President Macron of France as a new era of uncertainty. Sources also told Euronews that President Zelensky floated the idea of a 1 million man strong Ukrainian army supplied and supported by the West as any potential peace plan for his country. Shona Murray, Euronews, Brussels.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that talks with U.S. officials aimed at bringing the war in his country to an end will resume in Saudi Arabia next week. In a statement on his official Telegram channel, the Ukrainian leader announced that he'll be flying to Saudi Arabia on Monday to meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. After the meeting, a Ukrainian delegation will stay behind to participate in the talks. The dramatic turn in tide comes just 1 week after a highly tense meeting between Zelensky and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump soured U.S.-Ukrainian relations. The meeting ended in a shouting match in the Oval Office, and in the days that followed, Washington suspended military and financial aid to Kyiv, as well as intelligence sharing. But U.S. officials have reason to believe that Ukraine is now ready to meaningfully engage.
President Zelensky sent a letter to the president. I think the president thought that it was a really good, positive first step. And from that, we're now in discussions to coordinate a meeting with the Ukrainians in Riyadh or even potentially Jeddah. I think the idea is to get down a framework for a peace agreement and an initial ceasefire as well.
Witkoff added that Zelensky apologized for the events that transpired, hinting that this may be the reason behind Washington's shift in approach. But in a separate press briefing, Trump claimed that Ukraine wants to make a deal out of need, not choice, and without elaborating much, said the same about Russia.
I think what's going to happen is Ukraine wants to make a deal because I don't think they have a choice. I also think that Russia wants to make a deal because in a certain different way that only I know, they have no choice either.
The talks in Saudi come after a special European Council session was held in Brussels on Thursday, which Zelensky attended. European leaders explored ways to bolster Ukraine's defenses and guarantee Kyiv and continental security, as the threat of an increasingly Europe-critical Washington looms.
Protesters rallied outside the US embassy in Kyiv, demanding for help in liberating Ukrainian prisoners of war, reiterating that one of the points of peace is the exchange of POWs. On Thursday, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, during a EU summit in Brussels, said that it is very important that we ensure that Ukraine does not have to accept a dictated peace, and it supports a prisoner exchange, which can lay the foundation for a ceasefire. Since the early days of the war, Russia and Ukraine have conducted exchanges of prisoners of war, with the most recent taking place in February. Ukraine has not said the exact number of its POWs held by Russia, but estimates suggest it exceeds 8,000. Last April, Kyiv reported that nearly 37,000 Ukrainians, both military personnel and civilians, were missing. Russian President Vladimir Putin compared French President Emmanuel Macron to French Emperor Napoleon in reaction to a speech Macron held broadcasted live in which he called Russia a threat to Europe. The Russian president spoke at a meeting with mothers and widows of perished soldiers who were killed in Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
До сих пор кому-то не имется всех. Есть еще люди, которые хотят вернуться ко временам Наполеона, забывают, чем это закончилось.
While Putin did not mention Macron by name, he was referring to French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, who tried to conquer Russia in 1812 but was defeated. Meanwhile, European leaders met for an extraordinary summit in Brussels to discuss the fate of Europe and the war in Ukraine.
China hit back at higher U.S. tariffs on Thursday, with leaders saying they will not yield to what they say are coercion and threats. The Chinese foreign minister made clear that there are no winners in a trade war.
中方的立场是明确的、一贯的。无论是关税战还是贸易战，无论是冷战还是热战，都打不得，也打不赢。
As China's economic growth could see a hit if exports reduce, the country is hoping to boost internal production and consumption to combat a potential slowdown. The Chinese Minister of Commerce acknowledged that Chinese exporters face serious challenges and that the country is also dealing with slower consumer spending.
但同时我们也看到，国内消费需求不足、消费潜力释放不充分的问题还比较突出。我们再仔细打开来看一看。 从商品消费来看，主要的问题是消费能力、消费意愿偏弱。
China has also hit the U.S. with duties and other restrictions on American goods. The Commerce Minister, however, stressed that China is open to resolving differences over trade. He added that his country expects mutual respect in its dealings with other countries.
The head of Bosnia's Serb-majority entity, the Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, introduced new laws meant to ban the operation of state-level security and judicial institutions within the region. The acts come in response to the first instance verdict by the country's state-level court, sentencing Dodik to 1 year in prison and banning him from politics for 6 years. He was convicted for going against the decisions of the international community's peace envoy. The position has existed since 1995, when a peace deal came into force, ending a bloody conflict between the country's three main ethnic groups: Bosniaks, Serbs and Croats. This deal split the country into two administrative units: Serb-majority Republika Srpska and the Bosnian Croat Federation.
Nama je u Banja Luci veoma jasno da Bošnjaci u Sarajevu i Sarajeva kreiraju i hoće ratni sukob u Bosni i Hercegovini. Taj ratni sukob je motivisan njihovim stalnim dugodecenijskim i dugogodišnjim naporima da, kao što oni kažu, riješe posao ili da izvrše neku vrstu osvete prema Srbima, smatrajući da treba da eliminišu u političkom smislu svakog Srbina koji ne odgovara njihovim političkim projekcijama.
Neighbouring Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić said he insisted Dodik goes to the Bosnian capital for talks after the verdict, but said there was no response apart from a barrage of insults.
Kada sam boravio u Banja Luci posljednji put, zamolio sam rukovodstvo Republike Srpske i predsjednika Dodika da upute zahtev za razgovore ljudima u Sarajevu. Dan posle toga, sem salvi uvreda, patoloških uvreda, rekao bih, nismo ništa drugo dobili kao odgovor. Ja sam smatrao uvijek da je svaki razgovor bolji, blagorodniji i važniji od bilo kakvog pokazivanja snage, moći, sile.
Bosnian officials challenged the contentious legislation in the country's constitutional court, saying the laws were a violation of the peace agreement that ended the 1992 to 1995 war.
Pope Francis was resting on Thursday after a peaceful night during his third week of hospital treatment for double pneumonia, the Vatican said. The Pope has been sleeping with a non-invasive mechanical mask to guarantee that his lungs expand properly overnight and help his recovery. The 88-year-old Pope, who has chronic lung disease and had part of one lung removed as a young man, has been stable for 2 days after suffering 2 respiratory crises on Monday. Doctors underlined that their prognosis remains guarded due to the complexity of his condition.